There's a quote that I heard a while back from a college professor, and it's really stuck on to me, man. And I think it really relates to the trading card game industry as a whole. And that's if you want to invoke change, if you want to bring around change, teach the young and wait for the old to die. And I know you're gonna say, "Wow, Bronson, that's very morbid. I don't like this quote," but I'm telling you, man, it's very deep and it makes sense. Because if you look at the trading card game industry as a whole, the change that I'm proposing that's being happening at this current time is a change of perception of people looking at trading card games as investable assets versus just, a toy. And it's really brought on a lot of change in people's mindsets of the younger generation with this whole Pokemon and MTG boom in the 2020, early 2021. It's really brought a lot of change of perception in the younger generation's minds. And I want to focus on that aspect right now and then, transition to Flesh and Blood because I think it's just starting to show its teeth of effects out there. Now, you have to realize that when Logan Paul and all these Poketubers and all these things happen with everyone talking about collectibles and people rushing out to Target and there's tons of videos of people like putting up their shopping cart in front of a thing and just dumping every single product in their cart. This has impacts in people's brains. When you see these videos getting thousands of views, and you see that these, the younger generation of teens and maybe younger are watching these things and it's imprinting in their brain. It's imprinting. Collectibles have value. There's something in this. People are buying these things because it has value. And also with the Logan Paul thing, where he's like opening Charizards and all these, other videos where people are putting up like diamond hand emojis and tons of money symbols everywhere. And all these people are talking about how all these cards are X amount of dollars here, X amount of here, and graded is good. And getting a high grade of BGS 10 or PSA 10 is the holy grail. And this is all propaganda that's being permeated into a younger generation. And you might say, Bronson, oh, okay. Well, we've seen the effects of it. We had this giant upward trend of collectibles going up, and then it's going down right now in 2021. In the mid part of 2021, it was a bubble. It popped. It's no, it's all done with. The storm is gone. We've gone through the eye of the storm. The hurricane is now past. And what I tell you is the whole boom and bust of the whole collectible realm. It's not a hurricane. This thing is Chernobyl. This is a nuclear power plant explosion. Yes. Did the explosion go off and were everyone in the vicinity affected? Yes. But this isn't something that you can contain in like 1 or 2 years. This thing is going to permeate into future generations. Remember the quote I said, teach the young, wait for the old to die, and then just wait it out. Wait 10 years, and we're going to see more of this effect permeate into the secondary market for trading card games in general, especially Flesh and Blood. Think about it, man. Think about the one big and this is the big point I have. Think about the younger generation now. Why isn't the market being affected as much as it could? Because they're kids. They're teenagers. Think of all the teenagers, even in the young people in their 20s, right? They don't have money. Think about the money. Are people buying Pokemon cards? Are 13-year-old kids or 17-year-old kids buying Pokemon cards? No, their parents are buying it. Their parents are paying for these cards. Generally speaking, a lot of the wealth being put into the secondary market for these cards are based on the parents and the older individuals. That's why a lot of people don't understand Flesh and Blood and why it has gained a lot of traction monetarily, in a very short amount of time. It's because it caters to the adult crowd. Adult crowds, where we all have, big boy jobs. We have our paycheck. We can buy what we want. Put yourself back in your shoes. Could I buy all these like crazy ass Pokemon cards or crazy ass, Magic the Gathering cards back in the day or Flesh and Blood? No. Are you kidding? Like back in the day, $20 was a lot to me. That was like a big deal. I never got to open up booster boxes until I was, in my higher 20s and early 30s. I I didn't get that experience earlier in life. So my main point is I think that this whole trend or of whole perception and the change of perception that the younger generation has in trading card games, the effects of that has yet to be seen. We've seen a short-term blip, and I think a lot of that is based on, the older generation who had the money to spend, who had the money to pay for these things. That's where we've seen the trend go up and the trend go down. But over time, wait 5, 10 years, when you have the younger generation who grows up into an adult who has a normal job out there, who has extra capital to spend on trading card games that they like, and they have this new perception of, wow, these things have value. I know this because I remember all these videos and all these things earlier on in my life told me that. It's trained a lot of younger generation people that these games have investable potential, that there's money in this. So I just wanted to talk about this because I think it's a really important topic, because it's one thing to say, okay, it was a boom and bust and all this thing, and the effects of the whole 2020 craze of trading card games is over with. And oh, this is cyclical. It happens every once in a while. But I think we haven't seen anything yet. I mean, when you have millions of views on these Pokemon channels, and you have hundreds of thousands of kids, and when I say kids, I mean like 10 to 14-year-old range, or even up to 18. When you have these individuals looking at these videos, learning these things, imprinting it into their brain, it's going to have an effect long term, and especially at this scale, with so many people tuning in and understanding what this stuff is worth. Because at this point in time, like I said, you have to look at the monetary value of how much people can spend on a daily basis. I, for one, can probably spend as much on trading card games as how many kids, and their parents of the kids only can spend so much in a general sense. So I definitely think that it's important to realize that, and important. And the issue is you can't really make a case study. You can't really put a number to the effect of what this thing happened long term, because people are going to attribute to other stuff and other things. But I can tell you for sure that the whole mindset and perception, and that's a key word that I like to say, because I love perception, man. It's an interesting topic, but it's changing. The perception of collectibles is changing. And I mean, let's take Logan Paul for instance. The video where he bought his Charizard. Man, there's this one clip that I've talked about in the past where he literally force feeds you, and not force feeds you. He's explaining to the viewer, but it's like he's reading off a Wikipedia thing. It's very suspicious to me, and that's a little conspiracy I have. But he basically says, "Hey, these are assets. These are assets that don't depreciate. I'm done buying Lamborghinis. Lamborghinis do nothing in my life. They just die in value. I'm, I'm buying these collectible assets." And that imprints onto everyone who's watching it, which is very, very interesting. And I know he's just trying to make a video. I know he's just trying to explain to, the people what he's doing in life, and that's great and all. But, the reason why they call them social influencers is because they influence change and change in perception of things. And that's kind of the thing, what he's saying is Lambos are out and then Pokemon is in. It's it's a wild ride, man. It's very interesting. And when you see other content creators or big people who are talking about this whole stuff, that they are propagating this as well. That collectibles can be investments, that they retain value. Because the only reason why we pay so much for cards already is we perceive that they have value because everyone else wants it. If nobody wants it, if there's no demand, card's not going to be worth anything. And there's a bunch of different forces at play that propagate this type of vibe and this type of thing, and I'm happy for it. Let me just say that at the end of the day, I love it. Collecting trading cards and enjoying it and being a part of it, it's a lot of fun. And I do agree that they have good monetary value, because if you have X amount of thousands of people in a trading card game, and you have certain items in that trading card game that are very scarce, of course they're going to have value. Of course there's going to be some, money behind it, because not as many people in the whole community can own those types of assets. Makes sense to me. but I just definitely want to evaluate the landscape and see different things that are propagating this perception of trading card games have value. And when I see this whole, big boom and bust of the trading card game realm, I'm just looking at it thinking, wow, what is this going to do in the next 5 to 10 years when you have all of this younger generation who are, because the main point of this too is the main market was Pokemon that just got extremely hyped. And Pokemon is geared toward the younger generation. So the younger generation is all like antsy. They have like the biggest, adrenaline of like, oh man, this stuff is amazing. I just want to buy it. But they don't have the capital. They don't have the cash in a larger sense versus adults. Adults, we're grown ass people. We can buy what we want in life. But with kids, it's like, oh, I have to, do my chores every weekend to afford this trading card game. You have to look at it that aspect. They just don't have the money. And when they grow up and they actually do have the money to spend, what are they going to do with it? And I'm going to rant a little at the end, but I can identify with that myself. As a kid, I love Magic the Gathering. I love, a bunch of different trading card games. And I would just buy a bunch of cards and I had a lot of fun. But I couldn't spend any money on like the big stuff. I would buy bulk because it was cheap. And I would just have fun like reading the cards and honestly going through bulk was a lot of fun. I would just hours, man. I wouldn't even build decks. I would just like take cards art. I was like, oh, this artwork looks cool, put it to the side. And I'd be like, oh, this card looks cool, put it to the side. I would go through bulk for hours because that's all I could afford. But later on in life, I think it was Ixalan for MTG. I was like, hey, I'm a grown ass person. I have money in the bank. I can actually buy some boxes that I want. And I can tell you, the first box I opened, I felt like the guiltiest person in the world because I was like, oh man, like this is a treat. I get to open a whole box, not just a couple packs. And just that whole realization, and I think that that's going to happen to more and more people. And then after I opened that, I opened a bunch of other stuff, and I bought cards that I wanted. I started collecting a bunch of different trading card games, and then I got into Flesh and Blood, and then I just went like nuts and just dumped a ton of money into it because I just love the game. I think it's awesome, and it's just next level. It really makes you feel like an adult. But the whole point of this is I felt that myself. As a young person, I got acclimated in trading card games, but I didn't really know that they were investable at all. I didn't have any grasp of rarity. I didn't know what things sold for. I didn't even know that anything was very, there's any money behind this. But then later on in life, I looked at a bunch of YouTube channels. Rudy from Alpha Investments in particular, he's propagating it too. That you know, old trading card games, especially Magic the Gathering, have monetary value because of their scarcity and in the whole history and whatnot and what have you. And that really imprinted on me, and I think it's imprinted on a lot of people that there's value behind these cards, and they can go up over time and gain value. So so that whole thing where I kind of like changed my perception happened. And then when I got into Flesh and Blood, it was kind of like second nature. I was like, oh wow, these are the alpha cards. This is the alpha version of this game, and I knew what that meant. I wasn't a little kid anymore. Where when I saw that there's an alpha version of this game, I was like, okay, this is going to be big in the future. This is going to be a really hot thing. I just put my money into it. I was like, yeah, that was great. This is great value for this stuff. So, I just really wanted to explain my personal feelings as well, my personal experience behind this whole change of perception to where I went from feeling like this was a toy back in the day to, current day where, I listen to Rudy, of course. I've listened to, a bunch of other trading card game channels and what have you, and Medium and forums and everything. And that's imprinted on me that trading card games have investable value. And when you take that in a nutshell, before this whole boom of Pokemon, there weren't that many eyeballs on this stuff. There was in the hundreds of thousands, possibly maybe more. But when you have these big social influencers getting behind this shit and just really like ripping it out and just putting tons and millions of people around the world like their eyeballs on this stuff, it's gonna change the perception. And it wasn't like me where my perception was changed later on in life. Theirs is changed earlier on in life. So they're probably much more susceptible for this change to occur. Teach the young, wait for the old to die. And this waiting period, 5 to 10 years, it'll be interesting to see how that really affects buying experiences in the future and how much the markets will grow because of that initial boom. And who knows, maybe that permeates another boom and another boom, and who knows what things could happen. Maybe trading card games become the next currency exchange, and there's a whole stock market for just trading card games. Can you imagine? There's like a Nasdaq for just trading card games. That'd be wild. Now I know I'm just going crazy here at the end, but the point stands is that it will I think that people right now think that this whole boom and bust was just a bubble and all this stuff, and they don't really think that there's lasting effects. They think it's over. It did and went and it's done with, and there might be inflation and all this stuff, and there might be a little other factors. But I think the big thing that's going to happen in the future is that the perception of the younger generation is the biggest thing that happened with this whole boom. Don't think about, like, regardless of what happened in the current environment in the last 6 months with cards and everything. I think it's nothing compared to the perception that it's imprinted on even the older generation, the 20s and 30s, but mainly the younger generation of Pokemon users. And once those users become 16 plus, well, here's Flesh and Blood. Welcome to the party, man. This stuff's investable too, just like the stuff you were into when you were younger in life. And hey, guess what? This stuff's adult. This stuff has adult themes in it, and it caters to an older generation who have the wealth to put into it instead of having to save up their money from the allowances of their parents. So it's really going to have a lasting effect. So thanks for listening to me. Let me know what you think. It's a really interesting quote that's been on my mind for a while. So I just really wanted to talk about it today. So thanks, man.